Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily update for today, which is October 14th, 2021. I'm going to continue with the reports I've been doing on the Green New Deal and the Great Reset, the two drives toward global dictatorship that are being pushed by the international financial interests tied to the City of London and Wall Street and coordinated through the role of the British monarchy, Prince Charles, and the Davos World Economic Forum. I'm concentrating on this because the next COP26 conference is now 16 days away in Glasgow, Scotland, and there's been a steady drumbeat, an escalation of reducing the use of fossil fuels, shutting down physical economy, all in the name of the fake science of climate change, man-made climate change. And so it's important that the actual story get out there before Google and others start censoring it by making it unlawful or by canceling anyone access to the internet of anyone who disagrees with the so-called scientific consensus, which is not science, it's ideology. And if you want more on this, you can go to the schillerinstitute.com website. We've had several conferences under the theme of There Is No Climate Crisis. And we also have a new pamphlet, a new statement, a wake-up call, which is available for downloading and circulation. Now, the most recent cause for concern for the supporters of the COP26 conference, the climate change conference in Scotland, is the reaction to the run-up of electricity and energy prices. These have gone skyrocketing, and there's panic, fear, reaction from the people who have to pay it, many of whom can't afford the higher prices, but also from the supporters of the Green New Deal who realize that this is feeding into the opposition. So the question that has to be posed to people is, are you prepared to shiver in the dark this winter, or will you join us to overturn this nonsensical ideological policy? The price hikes are partly designed to reduce energy consumption. The prohibitive costs for utilities, for transportation, fuel, for fertilizer. What happens when farmers can't afford fertilizer to the food supply? Why is this happening? Is it the shortages of these raw materials? No, because Klaus Schwab and his gang of genocidalists have decreed that the Green New Deal must be enacted. The fake science must be used to push it, and the financial community must be brought on board to ensure that there's no credit for anyone who wishes to produce electricity. Now, cutting credit for companies with a carbon footprint includes especially those involved in energy production. And this is clear in the statement from the summer of 2019 of Mark Carney, who was then the chairman of the Bank of England, who's now the climate czar for the United Nations, when he basically announced a bankers' compact that at the time 130 banks had agreed to stop lending for companies that are not moving to reduce carbon production. Now you have in the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department essentially carbon police. They have units that will be monitoring the investment of banks into companies that have a carbon footprint. What are they going to do? Shut them down? Cut off credit? Well, that's apparently what they're going to do. And now the Department of Defense, under Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, has released a document saying that not terrorism, but climate change is the greatest threat facing America, and that the U.S. military must play a leading role in fighting it. Well, what are they going to do? How are they going to fight climate change? Well, obviously by invading countries that don't abide by the policies decreed by the global banking dictatorship. Now, this was clear in an interview with Mark Carney that he gave to the Washington Post on October 12th, in which he stated that private banks in the financial sector must produce a change in the plumbing of the financial system to push liquidity into the speculative bubble while cutting investment to the productive economy. This is, of course, what he said before, but he's reiterating it on the eve of the conference in the Washington Post. Now, Carney said climate change must become the, quote, fundamental driver of every investment decision or lending decision, unquote. Either you go along with the program or you don't get credit. You think that's going to drive prices up? If you think that, you're right. Secondly, he said that for COP26 to succeed requires, quote, to put it bluntly, money. A lot of it, unquote, for investment in green technology. And here's what he said, somewhere between $100 and $150 trillion of external finance over the next 3 decades. Now, that's an extraordinary figure. It's at least 5 to 10 trillion per year. And he said, well, taxpayers and governments won't pay for it. Well, that's a fraud, because if you're going to have your energy prices going up, you're going to be paying for it. Governments will end up paying for it because individual corporations don't have the resources to pay for it. But the idea that the private sector, the private equity is going to pony up all that money, they'll only do it if that money's available. How will it be available? The banks will deliver it to them based on money printed by the central banks. So central banks will be moving into the business of deciding which companies get credit or not based on their carbon footprint. That's what Carney's talking about. Now, he said that fossil fuel use must be, quote, wound down as we ramp up renewable and other clean sources of power, unquote. These clean sources of power, windmills and solar, don't produce enough electricity. They still don't have the storage capability to compensate for times when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining. And if you live in countries such as the United Kingdom or North Germany, there are many, many times where there's no wind and no sun. And that's been a factor in the driving up of utility costs. Now, Carney concluded his discussion by saying that there are countries, and he named 3 in particular, China, Indonesia, and South Africa, which, quote, won't go along with these policies without a fight, unquote. Now, he's absolutely right about China, as was made clear by Prime Minister Li Keqiang, who gave a speech before the National Energy Commission on October 12th. And what he said is that that energy security is a priority, and that must include the capacity for enhancing self-supply. Now, China is making a concentrated effort to increase nuclear power, but they also have coal. They're importing coal, and they're expanding their coal production. He said in his speech, the solution for China is to optimize the capacity of coal production through building advanced coal-fired power plants, and then they can retire some of the older plants. But they're not giving up coal. They've made that explicit. And then he added they're also going to intensify domestic oil and gas exploration. And the Chinese National Energy Commission said, quote, it is impossible to get rid of traditional fossil fuel energy in the short term, unquote. President Putin made a similar set of comments in an energy conference in Russia this week, where he ridiculed the Europeans for their short-sighted policies of moving to unreliable sources and inefficient sources of energy, such as wind and solar, and then trying to blame Russia when there's not enough energy, claiming that Russia's not reaching their contracts. Both Putin and Sergei Ryabkov ridiculed that and said Russia has consistently fulfilled its contracts. Now, The Guardian said of the Chinese National Energy Commission statement, this will, quote, cause alarm in the run-up to COP26. So it's clear what we're seeing now. There are 2 processes in motion. One is to isolate China and other so-called carbon outlaws, countries that won't go along with these phony mandates based on fake science. And then secondly, to attack countries like the United States, which are not going to abide by these agreements. The London Economist, the mouthpiece for the City of London, said the biggest problem for COP26 will be, quote, getting Americans to kick their addiction to fossil fuels, unquote. In other words, give up your car, shiver in the dark, Stop eating meat and get ready for the brave new world of green electricity, green energy. And if you can't afford it, too bad, but there will be a bubble that will be built up for the richest people in the world. That's what the Green New Deal and the Great Reset are about. Again, go to the schillerinstitute.com website to get material that will back up these claims, these charges that we're making, and become an organizer with us to crush the Green New Deal. Tomorrow will be Friday. I'll take your questions. Send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com.